Our recording is started.
We will start at 3:05, by the way. Hello, welcome back. We're first going to have a review over loops and a bit more on Booleans. So what are loops? We learned about them last week, but what are they? Well, they're a statement which loops over a certain piece of code until a condition is met. So how do we write one? Well, to write a condition, a loop, we first write a while loop. We first write while and then a condition. And then we follow it with a colon and then the code. In this example, we will start with I equals 0 and add 1 to I until it reaches 5 and print it. This will give you all the numbers from 0 to 5, not including 5. For a for loop, it's also pretty simple. We have for, then we put a variable, then in range, and the number of iterations you want. It will be from 0 to n-1 for iterations. Here's an example. For I in range of 5, print I. This will print to you 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Boolean operators. There are three main Boolean operators that we use. The first one is not. Not just makes it the opposite. Not true is false, and not false is true. The and keyword checks the two conditions on either side and only reports true if both are true. First, we have true and true, which is true because both of them are true. False and true is false because false is false, and they're not both true. And false is obviously false. The or keyword checks the two conditions on either side, just like and, but it only reports true if at least one side of it is true. True and true is true because at least one is true. True and false is true because one of them is true. And false is false or false is false because one of them, both of them are false. I'll give you 2 minutes to type in chat the answers to these 6 questions.
If any of you need any help, just be sure to DM anyone who has Paly Robotics at the end of their name. And any of those people will be able to help you.
All right, I see a lot of you have answered these in chat, so let's continue. The answers are true, false, false, false. Hopefully you guys got that. All right. So here are some practice problems that we will code. All right. I have the problems here. So the first problem is take an input from the user, and if do you like snakes and do you like lizards? If the response to both of the questions is yes, then you print the sentence, you love reptiles. If they like either snakes or lizards, then you print the sentence, you like some reptiles. Else, if they don't like both snakes and reptiles, print the sentence, you don't like reptiles. So when it says snakes or lizards, that's a pretty good indication to use the or operator. And when it says both, that's saying you should use and. So let's start. So first we're gonna make a variable like snake for the input, do they like snakes? If you remember how to take input, use the input function with a prompt. I like to put a space at the end so there's some gap for when you type. Now we do the same for lizards. Now that we have both variables, we can start with an if statement. If likes lizards equals yes, and likes snakes equals yes, then we print what it says here. You love reptiles. We could, after this, write an if statement, but that would give an error because if we write another if, like this, with the or, it will run this immediately afterwards, and it will print out you love reptiles and you love some reptiles immediately afterwards, because this will also run if this runs. Instead, we can write elif. This will make sure that if this is true, this will not run. Like before, we print out what it says up there. For the last one, we print out else because there are no conditions needed for it. Now if we run it, it'll ask if I like snakes and if I like lizards. Probably should. It says I love reptiles. That's what we want. Do you like snakes? No. Do you like lizards? Yes. I like some reptiles. Do you like snakes? No. Do you like lizards? No. You don't like reptiles. Good. This works. By the way, in case you didn't know, putting 3 quotes like this can comment out a big line of code. Does anyone have any questions? All right. The next problem is starting from a random inputted number inside a while loop, multiply the inputted number by 5 and print the number until it is larger than 150. So we start with the inputted number. And then inside a while loop, we multiply the number by 5 until it is larger than 150. However, we can't just do this immediately because random number is a string. So we have to change it to an int. We do this using the int function, which takes a string and outputs an integer. So we wait until it is larger than 150. So while it is less than 150, we will be multiplying. All right, let's see if this code runs. And we also have to print random. Forgot that. All right, it works. Does anyone have any questions on that one? All right, the last one. Print out all the numbers divisible by 5 from 0 to 49 using a for loop. All right, this is very simple since it doesn't take any input. For I, which is our variable name, in range, then we put the range 50. So this will be all the numbers from 0 to 49, because this will give you all the numbers from 0 to 1 minus to n minus 1, n being 50. If you remember how to find if a number is divisible by another one, good for you. If you don't, you can use modulo or the percent sign. So if I modulo 5 is equal to 0, which means when you divide I by 5, the remainder is 0, so it's divisible, then print it out. If you run this, it should give you 0, 5, 10, and all the other numbers divisible by 5 up until 49. Nice. Does anyone have any questions on this one? Good. So now we have some problems for you to do by yourself. One of them is a challenge problem. So let us know once you finish these first 3 problems. Good luck.
Once again, when you're done with the first 3 problems and had a chance to look at the challenge problem, go ahead and type in the chat saying that you have completed the independent problems.
How much more time would you guys need? Could you let us know in chat which numbers have you done? Can everyone type in chat what problem they are on? In case any of you are stuck on number 3, I'll remind you that to find if a number is divisible by another number, you do that x modulo what number you're trying to find out if it's divisible by. For example, if you're trying to find out if 10 is divisible by 5, you would do 10 modulo 5. Modulo is percent, so on most keyboards that would be shift 5. Does anyone want me to code out number 3? Okay, I see some no's in the chat. So is everyone okay if we move on? All right, I see some yeses in the chat, so we'll be moving on unless anyone says no. Okay, we'll be moving on. So now we're gonna move on to what our lesson is about, functions. So what is a function? You may be familiar with a function from math class, but if not, it's fine. A function is a relationship between inputs and outputs. In Python, a function is a block of code that when given an input, returns an output. Now, this isn't always true because functions can take nothing as an input as well, and they can also give nothing in return. An example of this would be the print statement. It doesn't really return anything. So when would you use a function? Functions are mainly used when you do not want to repeat code. For example, a very complicated math equation done on a variable Well, you could write out that complex math equation in every single place you want to use it, but it's going to get really annoying very soon if you have a big code base. And if you want to make a change to that function, it's going to be near impossible for you to do it without a function. So these are mainly used where you want to repeat a complicated thing a lot of times in your code. So how do you write one? Well, to start writing a function, you need to give Python a keyword. This is similar to for loops and while loops and if statements. The keyword in this case is def. Def stands for define, and it tells Python to start defining a function. After writing def, we need to give our function a name so we can call it later. Here we'll be calling it print sum. So our code so far is def print sum. But now that it has a name, we need to give it some input. So what we want print sum to do is take two numbers and print the sum. Pretty simple, right? So here we have parentheses to tell Python that we're taking input, and we have our two variables that we want as input, A and B. So the last part, similar to everything else, you need a colon. And this will tell Python that you're going to start coding. Your code will go inside of here, and it needs to be indented like for loops, if statements, and pretty much everything else. Now, there's an important concept that we haven't talked about yet, scope. So what is scope? Scope is a place where there are many scopes inside of your code. Each different scope has different variables. So inside of a function, if you define any variable here where it says code goes here, you cannot access that variable outside of the function. That's because the function is in one scope. In other words, variables initialized inside of a function are local to that function, meaning you cannot access them anywhere else. So here, you already have two variables, A and B, defined over here. So we can use A and B as variables inside of our function, nowhere else. So if you call the function printsum with inputs 1 and 2, A would be 1 and B would be 2. This is because A is the first variable inside of here, and the first number is 1, and B is 2 because 2 is the second one and B is the second variable. So we want this to print out the sum of A and B because we call it print sum. And we want it to give it to us to use outside of the code. So we can do this really simply, the first part, printing it with the following code, print A and B, A plus B. We've already learned this. However, this still leaves us with the question of how do we get the sum outside of this function? This is where the return statement comes into play. The return statement can only be executed once inside a function. You can have multiple return statements, but only one of them will be executed when you call a function. So what return does is it first stops the execution of the function and it returns whatever value you give it to be used outside of the function. So here we have def print sum A and B. You first print A plus B, and then you return A plus B. After this, the function will stop executing. So one bug that you might encounter is if you write the return statement before the print line. This will stop the execution of the code at return, and you will never have this executed. Now, this is a lot to take in at once. So does anyone have any questions? All right, I don't see any questions in chat, so let's move on. So how do you use a function? You've already used print, so it's pretty similar to that. To use it, you call it. To call a function, you need to use its name and give what input it needs in parentheses. So if we have the function print sum, which takes two numbers as inputs, we would write print sum 1 and 2. This will print out 3 because that's how we defined it. Functions can also return values. So in our example, we returned 1 plus 2, A plus B. So to do this, we have to define a variable as that value. So here we have a c is equal to print sum of 1 and 2. This will make c equal to 3 because 1 plus 2 is 3. So some examples of functions. So one basic example of a function is one that takes a number and multiplies it by 2. Here we have multiply 2. So first we define it using def multiply 2. We take in the input x, then we have the colon. With the indent, we write return x times 2. So multiply 2 with input as 3 will give us 6. With input as 0 will give us 0. Pretty simple. Another example of a function is one that prints hello. This doesn't have a return statement, and this doesn't have any input. All it does is print hello. So when you're calling this, you just do say hello, followed by parentheses with nothing inside of them. Remember, if you're to do c is equal to say hello, c will be none, which is not good because it will likely cause an error. So here are some practice problems which I will code with you guys. So first one is write a Python function to find the max of 2 numbers. So let's get started. So write a Python function to find the max of 2 numbers. Def max 2, or max of 2 numbers. We take input 2 numbers, a, b. You can call them num1, num2 if you want. Doesn't really matter. Then we indent and we return max of those 2 numbers. So how do we do it? If a is greater than b, that means a is the max of those 2 numbers. We return a. Else, we return b. If we run this code, nothing will happen. This is because we never called the function. So to do this, we do max 2. And let's give it 1 and 2. This will also not give anything because we don't do anything with this. We have to print. If you wanted to do something with the output, you could define it to a function. Max is equal, b is equal to 2. You can define a variable named b even though it's here. However, it's not going to be the same variable. Just to show you, if I put 3 here, b will be 3, not 2. So while this is simple, we could make it even simpler. You see, the else statement isn't needed because this return statement will stop the execution of the function. See? So why it stops it is you first do if, then you return a. Return a automatically stops the execution of this function, so we move on. If it was to do with prints, so instead of this, I would to do this will print out both of them. And b is none because this doesn't have any return statements. Well, no, it won't execute this code because a is not greater than b. Does anyone have any questions on this example? All right. Let's delete this and let's write a function to check whether a number is in a given range. So what does this mean? Let's say our range is 1 to 3. we need to check if a number, A, is within 1 to 3. How would we do this? Well, we could do A is less than 3 and greater than 1. So let's try coding this. We def in range. Oops. Not that. I have no idea what that was. So def in range, we need 3 values. Num for the number, in this case would be A, and then the range, A comma B. So this will take, range is from A to B, returns true if num is in that, else returns false. All right, remember to put the colon. Let's start. If num is less than B and num is greater than A, like we put here, return true. If otherwise, return false. You could also put else, return false. However, that's not necessary in this case. However, it might be good practice. Now, let's run this. Print in range 1, 0, 3. This should give true because 1 is in between 0 and 3. Now let's change that to 5. This should give false because 5 is not within 0 and 3. All right. Does anyone need more time with this? Does anyone have any questions on the second one? All right, I don't see any questions in chat, so let's continue. The next problem is create a function which takes a number and a string and prints the string as many times as the number. For example, repeat print 5, high will print high 5 times. All right, so let's do this. Define repeat print 5, A, B. You could also give these better names, for example, times and string. This would be a lot better because people can actually see what they're putting in. So let's do this. For, remember for loops, I in range times print string. Let's see if this works. Notice how I don't have to print this because it doesn't return anything, and it prints it inside of here. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. It works. Any questions on this one? All right, I don't see any questions. I don't know if you learned about factorials in math class, but if you didn't, a factorial is the product of all the numbers from 1 to the given number. I have some examples in the slide here. So factorial of 3 is 1 times 2 times 3, or 6. Factorial of 1 is 1. And factorial of 5 is 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5. So let's code this. Def factorial. Input is just a single number. Let's call it n. Now we can do this with the for loop. For I in range of n. If we write, then we need another variable to hold the sum. Let's say, or the product. Product is equal to 1. If we set product is equal to 0, 0 times anything is 0, so it won't work. This code will give an error. Does anyone know what that error is? Type it in chat. It won't give an error, but it will give us the wrong answer. Oh, wait, print. Does anyone know what the error here is? It's giving out none. Does anyone see what the problem with this function is? Why it's printing none instead of 6? Yes, you're right. One of the issues is I. I starts out with 0. So instead of I, we would need to do I plus 1. However, this still doesn't explain why it's giving us none. Does anyone remember what we're missing? I'll give a hint. It's what returns the value to the outside, to all the code outside. We need to return the product. Now if we run this, it will give us 6 like intended. All right. Hopefully you understand how functions work. Now we have a few problems for you. Here are the independent problems. Hopefully you can do them. By the way, do the challenge last. If you want me to go over some more examples, tell me in chat.
Hey, wait for me.
Can everyone type in the chat once they finish the first question? Say like you're done with the first question or something.
Do you guys want me to go over problem 1? Type in chat if I should.
Welcome, everyone. Let me pull up the correct slide. Apologies. And here we go. Can you see this? Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
If this breakout room will close in 10 seconds. on my screen.
Hmm.
I'll just close it.
Yep. I'm not.
Times 5, because we multiply by 5, and then we subtract 2, minus 2. If we try this, it should give 2. It should give minus 2, I mean. And it does. Let's just try it with 1, just in case. It isn't running. Now that we have the code written down, let's go over it in a lot more detail. So def defines the function. So this is the main thing that defines the function. Then we put in the name, which doesn't really matter that much. But it's nice to give it a descriptive name because when you're using it, you want to know what function you're using. To put in the input, we need parentheses. And then inside of the parentheses, you put all the variables you want as inputs. So if you put 2 variables inside of here, N and B, you need to put 2 things when you're calling it. So this will give an error. See, an error. So here you would have to put comma 2 to give B an initial number, and it works. B doesn't do anything, so let's just delete it. Similarly, if you put too many things in here without putting them in the function, it's also going to give an error. All right. Now, this is a really simple function that works in one line, but let's make it a bit more long. So n5 is equal to n times 5. N2 equals n5 minus 2. Then we can return n2. This should also give the same thing. So inside of here, we can write a lot of code. And the return statement is what gives it for us to use outside. If I were to write print hello outside after a return statement, it's still inside because of the tab. It won't print anything. Also, if I try using print n5, it's not going to work because n5 is not defined because of scope. Also, if before the function I define a equals 3, and over here I put print a, it's also going to give an error. Wait, no, it's not. Never mind. You can use functions from outside inside of a function, but you can't use variables defined inside a function outside. Hopefully this cleared stuff up. Continue with the rest of the problems and let us know if you need help. How are you guys doing with question number 2? Do you need any help on that one as well?
Type in the chat once you finish question 2. And if you see a lot of red text when you try to run your code, or you're getting an error, you can try to figure out what the error is. And if you still can't figure it out, just let us know and we can help fix that mistake.
Are you guys having trouble with number 2? If you are, tell us in the chat.
Luca, one person is asking to explain number 2. Richard.
Yeah, I see. How many people want me to do number 2 as a whole? All right, I see a lot of people are confused in chat. So I'm gonna go over some practice problems. All right, so I'm gonna write a bunch of functions. These are not questions, but they're just random functions. So when we're writing a function, hopefully you know by now, you write def to start. So after def, you write the name. So a name can be practically anything, as long as it's not something previously defined in Python. So let's say cool function. Then you need inputs. You can put any amount of inputs, 0, 10, 20. I mean, you shouldn't go over 20 because that's worrying, but you can if you want. So here, let's multiply a number by 3 and divide it by 2. Let's take a, and then return is what gives it to be used outside. Return a times 3 divided by 2. This is pretty simple. Let's make it a bit more complicated. Let's take a, b, and c. We take a multiplied by b divided by c. Now, you can also have multiple return statements. So let's write a function with if a equals 1, return a times b divided by c. If a equal 3, return a times c divided by b. And otherwise, we will return a plus b plus c. So you can have multiple return statements. When you're calling it, this will, because of the return statement, this will make this value will be what's here. Parameters are basically variables which can be used inside of here. You can even rechange them. For example, I want c to always equal 1 because why not? So no matter what you input here, c will be redefined to 1. Now, this isn't printing anything in the console because we don't have any print statements here. So let's add one. Print this. 2.0. That's what we want. Now, you can, when you're defining a variable to equal what the result of a function is, you can do that. You can also redefine it. So c is now equal to full function of 2, 3, minus 100. And then if we print, it will run. So if you guys are confused, some simple questions you can have is stuff like we did here. Multiply 2, say hello. So write a function similar to this, but instead of saying hello, it'll print out hello Bob. You don't have to do these. You can write your own functions just to practice. And if you're having any trouble with this, you can send us a link to your REPL, and we'll try to see what the error is. And if you have no idea what to do, you can tell us and send us a link to your REPL, and we can help you out there. Can you let us know which problem you guys are on? At 4:25, we're going to do a quick Kahoot. All right, we're going to start a Kahoot now. So go to kahoot.it. Hopefully you know by now where it is. And let's play this Kahoot. I'll give you a few more minutes to open up the Kahoot. Do any of you need more time to join? Type in chat if you need more time. You have 1 more minute to log in to the Kahoot. We will begin at 4:30. All right, so it's 4:30, so we're going to start now. All right, let's go over this. So this is just a review question for, so false and true is false. Next is not true. Not true is false. False or false is false. So this entire first part is false. The next part, and true, false and true is false. So the answer is false. Does anyone have any more questions on this one? I see the most of you got this correct. So, oops, I clicked next, but that function didn't have any return statements. So it would return none. However, if you wrote 9, that is what it would print. All right. So what is math of 2? So num is 2 because you're in math of 2, and this is only variable, and that's what you give it. So while num or 2 is greater than 1. So is 2 greater than 1? Yes. Num equals num minus 1. 2, or num equals 2 minus 1, or 1. So now we go back to the while. Is 1 greater than 1? No, it isn't. So we don't execute this again, and we go here, and we return 1. So the answer would be 1. 0 would be if we had written great instead of num is greater than 1, num is greater than or equal to 1. 2 is not going to happen because this will execute at least once, and none is not going to happen either because we have a return statement. So this question is, what does Booleans are cool always print? A is always going to be a Boolean, so there are not going to be any errors. So if A is true, there are only two options for a Boolean. So if it's true, you print false and true, which is false. If it's false, we print false and false, which is also false. So it's always going to print out false. By the way, does this code compile just means, are there going to be any errors? If there are going to be errors, false. If there are no errors, then true. So let's see the code. Def true, which takes input as A, and return true. This is not going to work. It's not going to compile because true is already defined. You cannot define a function as true. If you define a function as true, it's not going to work because true is a Boolean. There are a few things that you can't define function as, and true, false are some of them. You also cannot define a function def or for or while. Where compile is, are there going to be errors or not? If there are errors, false, it does not compile. If there are no errors, true, it does compile. Good job. There are no errors in this code. It's good code. By the way, there's an error in this Kahoot. It should say good code instead of nice function, by the way. So why this doesn't print anything? First, because you're calling the wrong function. That's wrong in the Kahoot, but it doesn't print anything because you first return. When you return, this stops the execution. There is no error in this code, but if you said error, you are correct because this is an error. There's no function, defined nice function. However, if you said error because there's a print line after the return, that would be incorrect because you are allowed to code afterwards. It's just not going to run, and it's basically useless. And if you said 3, then I don't know. I don't know what to say, but no one said that, so good. And if you said 4, remember that return stops execution of the function. All right. All right, let's see what it is. For I in range of 2 to 6, this will run 4 times. 6 minus 2 is 4. All right, let's see. Good job. Good job. And good job. All right. Good job, everyone. Now let's go over vision processing. So if you remember from a week or two ago, we learned about color vision processing. Well, now we're going to teach some applications. All right, so this is one of the most important use cases of it, and it's self-driving cars. Remember, vision processing was where you took an image and you process it to find out things about it. This is a very advanced use case, which is still being worked on today. However, it's pretty cool. So here you can see how it's identifying the road, and it then identifies that there's a car over there. So this would be very useful for self-driving cars and autopilot. So you don't crash into other cars, you identify with the cars and you stay in your lane. So you drive straight. Here's another example of why you'd use color vision processing. This is a bit more simple. The robot is very complicated, but the vision processing is pretty simple. You just find the red strawberries and ignore the green strawberries or yellow strawberries. So here it identifies which strawberries are ripe, and then it can send the robot hand to find them and pick them. This is a very cool use case of vision processing. Now the last one is a ping pong robot. It's not very practical, however, it's pretty cool. So it identifies the yellow balls by their color, and then based on their position, it can move the paddle to hit the ball. And this is an example of why you would use it. It's not going to lose because it has that camera right over here, which can see it. And then based on its position, it can do various things with the paddle. Does anyone have any questions on these 3 videos? If no one has any questions, then that's it for today. I know functions are a more difficult topic than before, but we will go over them next time as well in the review section.
Nice job, everyone. I think we'll see you guys on Wednesday. And at that time, we'll go a little bit, we'll talk about functions a little bit more. And yeah, we'll be doing a bunch of projects.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming. Hopefully you learned something new.
We'll be doing a rock, paper, scissors game. So yeah.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for coming. See you
Goodbye.
guys.
Goodbye.